Well, good morning, Liberal Kansas, Southwest Kansas, the Oklahoma Panhandle, and all other places where you tune in to get your news and views from the middle of America. This is Earl, the Leader in Times, on Wednesday, October 1st, 2025. Joining me as always on the far side, Jim Rice, and we have some special guests with us here today, so you're not going to want to miss the show today because we have a special event tonight at Light Park, 5 to 7 o'clock. Republican candidates for governor, statewide offices like Secretary of State, some local candidates will be at the park. Free Brahms ice cream. You want to come out and meet these candidates as the campaign season for next year kicks off in Liberal tonight at 5 o'clock. And we have a couple of special guests here with us today. In a little bit, we're going to have governor candidate Ty Masterson. But before we get to that, we have a Secretary of State candidate, Pat Proctor, here with us to talk about his run for the upcoming race for Secretary of State. So we appreciate you coming in.
Thank you so much for having me.
And we always ask this. Jim knows this is kind of a loaded question. Everyone gets it. But when you came out to Southwest Kansas, how'd you get out here?
I drove from Wichita, so I teach at Wichita State. So I taught classes all morning, and then me and Garrett here, we hopped in the car and drove as fast as we could to Garden City for an event last night.
So you drove on 54?
Golly, I was too busy making phone calls. Garrett was driving. So
did you go through Greensburg?
We went through, Pratt through Kings.
Yep.
54.
Kingman.
I wasn't paying attention. I was working while he was driving.
So this is for you and the future governor candidate back here. 54 is a big deal to us.
Okay.
And there's been a few miles of 4-lane put on it. We're looking to get that 4-lane because if we can get attached to the rest of the state with 4 lanes, we can be a much better economic tool. It holds up some of our economic development when we're talking with companies and they ask, do you have this? Yeah. Do you have that? Yeah. Do you have 4-lane or an interstate? No. Okay. Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
And they're on down the road. But if we can get that, we can do a lot more for the state of Kansas.
Well, I'll tell you, I sympathize. I'm from Leavenworth, and we're the sleepy backwater of the Kansas City Metro because we don't have that 4-lane freeway from the highway to I-29 across the river or to Kansas City Metro, and that's one of the things I came to the legislature to do. Is so I sympathize and I understand the issue, and I definitely am supportive.
So Secretary of State, be the chief officer of elections in the state of Kansas, looking at get that opportunity to serve. What would you say are your priorities? What do you want to do?
So I've been in the legislature for 5 years on the elections committee, and for the last 3 years I've been the chairman of the elections committee. If I have the honor to serve people of Kansas as their Secretary of State, I'm going to do the same things that I've been doing as the chairman of the elections committee. I'm going to be focused on restoring confidence in our elections because we've got a crisis of confidence in the country and in the state in our election system. And I'm going to be working on that really by doing 4 things. The first thing is increasing transparency in our election system. Second is combating non-citizen voting. I've done a lot of work on that. I'd love to talk about it. And also combating ballot harvesting, and then cleaning up our voter rolls. We've got to give our clerks the tools that they need to make sure that our voter rolls are clean and only have folks on them that are eligible to vote in our districts.
Yeah, I'm sure you've seen just this week that a guy was serving as a superintendent of schools, and come to find out he was also a registered voter in Maryland.
Yeah.
And I mean, we are told over and over and over that's impossible.
Yeah.
It can't happen.
Yeah.
Well, it does happen, and it's a high-profile case. I mean, how do you rectify that? We always claim that everything makes it impossible, and yet one guy we find and he's registered.
Yeah. So I always tell people, be careful what you ask your federal government to do, because the federal government passed this law, the National Voter Registration Act, which has really tied clerks' hands in a lot of ways in cleaning up their voter rolls. So what I've been working on as the chairman of the Elections Committee is giving those clerks tools so that they can get those folks off the voter rolls if they've moved or if they've died. In my second year in the legislature, I sponsored and passed a bill that if somebody hasn't voted for 4 years or had any voting activity for 4 years, the clerk is allowed to send them a notice, and if it comes back undeliverable or doesn't come back at all, it starts a clock to take them off the voter rolls. We also, this year, my committee passed a bill that allows the clerks to use online obituaries, because before they could only use the newspaper, and a lot of people just aren't putting stuff in the newspaper anymore. So you take them off the voter rolls. But there's more we could do. One thing I'd like to do is, if you were to lose your mind and move to Texas for some reason, and you go get a driver's license there, Texas calls Kansas and to the DMV and says, hey, cancel their driver's license because they've moved. There's absolutely no reason that the DMV can't share that data with the Secretary of State's office, so we can also take them off the voter rolls if they move. And who knows if you're alive or dead is your credit card company and your bank. So I would like to, the publicly available part of our voter rolls, because our voter rolls are publicly available, I'd like to contract with those credit rating agencies and just send them the data and say, hey, which of these people are dead? So we can take them off the voter rolls. Because, in Leavenworth, I don't know how it is here in Liberal, but in Leavenworth, when I go knocking on doors, I'm knocking with the voter rolls. I go to the door, it's the 2 people who live there now, the 2 people who lived there before them, the 2 people who lived there before them, because people don't think to change the registration when they move. So we've got to help that along and clean up our voter rolls.
Yeah, I'm going to let Jim, because Jim is a former county commissioner, but I know we were doing an event not too long ago, and he was going over our local ones and saw a bunch of names. I'm going to let him share that, but I'm going to ask you a question, and I'm going to let him talk to you about that experience. But I never understood, you got to file a certificate of death. Why can't a copy of the certificate of death just be given to the county clerks?
Yeah, so if they die in Kansas, the Department of Health and Environment gives notice to the Secretary of State's office, and the Secretary of State office notifies the appropriate clerk to get them off the voter rolls. But if they don't die in Kansas, then we don't get that notification. And it used to be that we were getting from the Social Security Department or agency, we were getting a list of people who died so that we could remove people from voter rolls. But for the last 4 years, we haven't been getting that. Now, Scott Schwab and the Secretary of State's office has been doing a lot of work with the Trump administration to kind of restart that. And there's a lot in the news right now about, us sharing our voter roll information with them so that we could get that stuff cleaned up. But there are a lot of other ways that, there are a lot of other kind of avenues that we can use to help this process along. Just identify people who've moved, identify people who have died, and get them off the voter rolls.
So Jim, you want to share that experience you had?
Well, I think cleaning up the voter rolls, everybody assumes that, they are, pretty much up to date. Well, here, I don't know, it's been a year or so ago, I don't remember what the issue was, but I got a list of a portion of, I think maybe it was just in my district, I don't remember, but anyway, I noticed that there were 3 individuals on there that I knew personally that were on there. One of them died in 2007. I think the other one was maybe in 2008 and the other one in 2010. And I thought, why in the world are they still on there? That's, and I mean, there wasn't any reason. And but I know my dad's name was on there for, I don't know, 5 or 6 years before it finally disappeared. But I'm kind of like you. It looks to me like, when you're dead, and there ought to be some communication between the mortician or whoever it is, and that death certificate, and that a copy of that goes to the county clerk or I don't know who works that up, but that extra copy needs to go to the county clerk, and they take it off right then.
Yeah.
There's no need of waiting 2 or 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, absolutely. And our county clerks are great. Even before I was running for Secretary of State, because I'm chairing the Elections Committee, I tried to go around and meet as many clerks as I can. They're working hard at elections, but they're also working hard at all the other stuff that the clerks got to do with property tax, revenue neutral statements, and all that. We got to give them the tools, because they're going to dot the I's and cross the T's, but they're not going to make up laws. They're going to follow the laws that we give them. And so doing things like, working with the federal government to get the Social Security database so we could take those folks off is really important. You know, what we did with online obituaries, I think, is a great start as well. But I'd like to, you know, work with every kind of third-party data agency that we can, especially those credit rating agencies that know you're dead, so that they don't give you more money, so that we can find those people and take them off. But it doesn't happen if we don't, at the state level, authorize the clerks to be able to use that data to do it.
Well, you know, I think it's important to work with those clerks, and if you've been visiting with them, you know, because they know what's going on locally, and certainly not every county is, you know, one size maybe don't fit all.
Oh yeah,
but,
you could say that again.
know.
I'm meeting with the Seward County Clerk this afternoon for the first time here. I met her at a national conference, or at a state conference not too long ago, but I wanted to see her operation. But you're absolutely right. The greatness of the Kansas election system is that we have 105 counties, and the elections are run in that county by that elected official, and they're run in 105 different ways. So if you wanted to hack Kansas elections, you got to hack 105 counties. It's great. It's not a top-down, this is how you're going to do it. It's a bottom-up with the Secretary of State's office providing them with the tools so that they can serve their constituents. It's great. It's a great system.
And maybe you can ease my friend Jim's over here mind a little bit. We do use machines, but these machines are not internet capable. Is that correct? Maybe you can tell us a little bit about the machines.
So,
Jim is always leery.
Yeah.
So help him out.
Absolutely. So I sponsored and passed the legislation in my second year in the legislature to make it a crime to buy or use a voting machine that can connect to the internet. I work at the national level because I'm on the board of advisors for the U.S. Election Assistance Commission. So I've seen the processes that they go through. I've been in plants where they build these machines. I was in the Army 25 years, and the most secure facility I've ever been in my entire life was where they build election machines at a factory in Texas. It's crazy. But in addition to them not being connected to the internet, and a lot of people don't know this, so I'm glad that you asked this question. We have one of the most robust paper audit programs in the country here in Kansas. Randomly, you know, I'm talking like little pieces of paper out of a paper bag at the Secretary of State level, and in every county, they draw precincts and they draw races that they're going to hand count randomly after the election, and they pull out all those paper ballots, because every vote, whether you're filling in the little circle or you touch the touch screen, every vote produces a paper ballot. They pull out all those paper ballots and they count them, and if it doesn't match the machine exactly, we recount the whole race, and we probably do a forensic audit to figure out what's wrong to make sure that all the races were right. And you know, people just don't know that, and so there's a lot of fear and suspicion just because people don't know all of the great mechanisms that we have in place here in Kansas election system.
Oh, we do know that, but that's because we have a good county clerk who has shared that information and kept us in the loop of how that works. But most people probably don't. And that's why we do things like this, to keep people informed so they know how the elections work, how they're secured. You know, I mentioned before, I've had to go back to my car and get my wallet and get my license because that's the system in
Doesn't
Kansas.
matter if they know you. That's the rule. Our clerks
rule.
are awesome. And I'd just say, before we move on, that's what I mean when I say one of the things I want to do as Secretary of State is increasing transparency. What I've tried to do with my committee room as the chairman of the Elections Committee is turn it into a platform where we can have a conversation about elections. Because the last 5 years, this country, we have not been having a conversation about elections. We've been having a shouting match. And so in my committee room, sometimes I'll tee up a bill. I have no intention of moving, but I know it's going to create a conversation. It's going to bring people in who have concerns, and people can come in my committee room and they can share their concerns. And I might not agree with them, and if I don't agree with them, you know, I'm going to push back. I'm going to say, hey, did you know that we do paper audits? Did you know that we do all these things to scrub the voter rolls? But if I agree with them, I guarantee you the other side doesn't agree with them, and they're going to push back. But the point is, we're having a conversation, and it's crazy, but a lot of those conversations have become viral videos because people are so hungry to see and hear conversations about this topic. And if I have the honor to be the Secretary of State, I'm going to take that statewide. I'm going to go all over the state, and I'm going to host those conversations so people can share their concerns, because we need to listen to them.
Sure, and you know, when you look across the country, the big question is voter ID. It seems like it's 80-20, but that 20% that doesn't want it very loud to try to prevent, you know, safeguards to make sure our elections can be trusted and are legitimate. And I won't speak for Jim. He has his ideas of 2020. I have my ideas of 2020. But the one thing I know is, if you just look at the data, 2020 had almost 20 million more voters than any other election ever. And it even went back down in 2024. So, I mean, if just someone looks at data, you got to look at that and just say, that's an anomaly. Something was different that year. And I'm not saying what that something different is, but I'm saying something was different. Jim knows what he believes was something different that year. But, but when we're talking about securing elections, the other side that opposes that says that disenfranchises people. That for every time you require something, that there are some people who are just not going to get over the hurdle, and so you're keeping them from voting. How do you address that?
Well, a great example of that is I've been trying for the last 3 years, and I finally got it done this year. We repealed the 3-day grace period. So there used to be a law here in the state of Kansas that for 3 days after the election, we would keep taking in ballots, mail-in ballots, and we'd count them if they came in within 3 days after the election. And that might sound like, hey, the mail's slow, let's give people a little extra time. But I was going around and I was talking to the election officers. I was talking to the county clerks and the election commissioners. What they were telling me is a bunch of those ballots that were coming in didn't have a postmark. And yet they have to be postmarked so that you know that they were voted before election day was in, before the end of election night, and so they couldn't be counted. And I finally got the Secretary of State's office to actually pull all of the election clerks, and what they found is during the 2024 primary, 1 in 3 of those ballots that showed up during that 3-day grace period, which is 2% of all of the mail-in ballots, couldn't be counted because they didn't have a postmark. And so, the other side screams, oh, disenfranchisement, you're trying to, but data is data. And that's just unconscionable. The voter did everything right. The election clerk did everything right, but we're still not going to count the ballot because the post office didn't put a little stamp on it, because most of them don't have stamps, so they don't have to cancel a stamp, so they don't postmark. So, I'm not focused on the screaming on both sides. I'm focused on making sure that every valid vote is counted and only valid votes are counted. And I think that's a great example. You just gotta stay focused on addressing people's concerns and restoring confidence, and just kind of tune out all of the screaming and on both sides.
So I'm going to tell you a little 4th grade story. When I was in 4th grade, it was 1980 election, and I threw the paper, and the building looked a lot different back then, but there used to be a half wall, and the newsroom was on one side. There was a chalkboard on election night. And back then, you went to your local schools. Every school, the gyms were the places where you voted. And so I rode my bike up here after I threw my papers and everything, and started to watch. They were answering the phones and writing the numbers in from Garfield, from McKinley School, and all this, and watching the elections come in. I was only about as high as this cabinet right here, maybe, but Mr. Kitch, who was the undertaker, one of the undertakers at the time, his beeper, we had a beeper in 1980 in Liberal because it went off and he had to leave. But he was standing there with some other guys watching that wall. People would come in and watch the elections come in. But I grew up in an era where we had what was called election day.
Yeah.
You went on election day and you voted on election day, and then everything was counted at the end of the day, and we knew who won at the end of the day. I think about it like a race. You run and there's a tape, and you run through the tape. That's it. Someone won who hit that tape, but we're still counting that time. You coast after that. Yeah. And Kansas has done that, but we still have election season. It's this big, long period, and it seems like the wider the window, just like a thief or anybody else, the bigger the opportunity, the more the more opportunity for something bad to happen. Yeah. So, I mean, what's your take on, advanced voting? You've already talked about extending it afterwards and taking in votes after, but I mean, what's your view of the election season?
So, we were talking a little bit before we went live here. I hear a lot. I'll give you this example. So there's this law that's bouncing around Kansas right now. It's called the SAVE Act. It's full of good ideas. Every state will do voter ID. Every state will, do proof of citizenship to register to vote. Great ideas. I love them all. Let's do them all in Kansas. But the when the federal government gets involved, there's always all these second and third order effects. And perfect example is mail-in voting. They passed a law, it's Uniform and Overseas Voter Act, or Voting Act, UOCAVA is the acronym, and it forces us to do mail-in voting. We don't have a choice. We have to do mail-in voting. And so, we've got one of the smaller windows, 20 days, with the ballots go out 20 days before the election. Early voting starts 20 days before the election. And it's sort of hard to put the genie back in the bottle now, especially with early voting. I early vote because I'm busy on election day out getting votes out. So what we've got to focus on is making sure that whether you're voting early, whether you're voting by mail, or you're voting on election day, like a lot of folks like to do, and I encourage people to do, it has to be equally secure. And we've got a problem with mail-in voting. We've got a problem with ballot harvesting. I don't know how it is here in Liberal, but my district up in Leavenworth is one of the most contentious Republican districts in the state. It's always nationally targeted. And there are all these groups, these nonprofits from outside the state. They use AI to identify voters that don't vote, but if they did vote, they'd vote Democrat, and they just flood them with ballot requests, pre-filled out ballot requests, over and over and over again, till they sign one and then they fill them in. And it's public record who asked for a ballot. So 20 days before the election or 18 days before the election, when all those mail-in ballots hit people's mailboxes, all of a sudden there's all these college kids in my district knocking all the doors that I don't knock because those are people who don't usually vote. They're like, hey, I think there's something in your mailbox. Oh, wow, it's a ballot. Would you like help filling it out? Would you like me to turn it in? I won my second race. I'm in my third term. I won my second race by 144 votes. You ballot harvest just 200 ballots in my district. You flip that result. And so I've been really focused on stopping that, combating ballot harvesting. We do signature verification now. We've limited the number of ballots you can turn in that aren't your own. We tried to outlaw the pre-filled ballot requests. But we have this adversary that's working against us. They hate when I call them this, so I call them this all the time, the axis of ballot harvesting. The ACLU, there's a group called Loud Light, group called Appleseed, and they're suing us every time we try to do things to stop ballot harvesting because they want to ballot harvest. And I got to thinking, how are they getting all the money to sue us? And it turns out because they're nonprofits and they're supposedly nonpartisan, they can rake in millions of dollars from George Soros and foreign billionaires that they use to sue us, but they also use to put their thumb on the scale for constitutional amendment campaigns. And so this year we banned foreign money in constitutional amendment campaigns, and I could hear the wailing and gnashing of teeth from the Capitol when I was home waiting for the governor to veto it. But I know we hit the sweet spot because after we overrode the veto, they sued me. So they sued me over the law. So I know we hit the spot. But that is really, that is really kind of the nexus of the concerns with mail-in voting. And I've got some other ideas about how we combat ballot harvesting. But it's, until we kind of get the federal government out of elections completely, we're kind of stuck with mail-in voting, and we got to figure out how to make it more secure.
Sure, and I think a lot of people locally misinterpret that requesting a ballot, the letter that goes out is just a request for the ballot.
Yeah.
Some people said, I got a letter, and so I was getting a ballot, and other people no, that's a request.
Yeah.
Then you have to fill that out and have some form of identification.
Yeah. Yeah.
Send that back to the clerk's office, and then they will send you a ballot. That's the second letter, but you have to have that first one that verifies who you are, and signature, so they can do signature verification, things like that. But when you talk about just earmarking people and going out and getting them, I know this is probably cost prohibitive, but it wouldn't be so bad for us on the local level because the volume's not that great. But I would love that if you're requesting a ballot, then a person shows up at your door and says, here's your ballot, go ahead and I'm from the clerk's office, here's my badge, go ahead and fill this out and we'll certify it, you seal it, and we'll take it back in. Because who knows what happens once a ballot is out there. I'm glad we don't do like some states where they just mail ballots to every
Yeah,
single person.
Yeah, I'll die on that hill for sure. Another big concern is nursing homes, and this happens in Leavenworth County. I heard this story today or yesterday. I was up in Garden City, and I heard this story about Finney County. There's 100 people in the nursing home, and all of a sudden the clerk gets 100 ballot requests, and then they get all the ballots back. Did that person in the nursing home ever touch that ballot? What I'd like to do is what a couple other states have done is in nursing facilities, particularly if somebody rather than just mailing the ballot and getting the ballot back, somebody from the clerk's office, a Republican and a Democrat, have to go to the nursing home and help those folks do voting, so that you don't have a couple nurses requesting 100 ballots, filling them all out and sending them back in. And it's, again, is that enough to tilt an election? I don't know, but it's not just about the results of the election.
It would be here in Surrey County, because we've had several races that were decided by a coin flip or 9 votes.
Yeah, and it could. My senator, my state senator, just beat the incumbent by 31 votes out of 30,000. So it could.
So
it could tip an election.
Sure.
But what it's really about is voter confidence. It's about being able to assure people that the only votes that are getting counted are the votes that are cast by valid voters, and they actually voted those ballots. They weren't filled in by anybody else. They're filled in by the voter and with the voter's intent. And so, that's important. You know what? If we got a minute, I got a story. When I first got elected, they asked you what committees you want to be on, and I said what anybody from Leavenworth would say. I said, I want to be on the military and veterans, and I want to be on the corrections, because that's what we do in Leavenworth. And they put me on the elections committee. I'm like, why am I on the elections committee? But I'm like, well, if I'm going to be on the elections committee, I'm going to understand election law. So I made an appointment with the Secretary of State's office, and I spent the whole day with the election team, just going soup to nuts through elections. But the whole time I was in there, my phone, it's just blowing up. I'm just getting call after call and text after text. I wasn't going to be rude, because how often am I going to have all these great experts in there talking to me, feeding my head? So I kind of put it away until I was done. But when I was done, I walked out of Memorial Hall. I'm standing there on the sidewalk. I remember it like it was yesterday. I looked down my phone. The day I'd been in there learning everything there was to learn about elections was January 6, 2021. So while I was in there learning everything there was to learn about elections, January 6th had happened in D.C. And it just hit me like a ton of bricks that it was the most important thing I was going to be working on in the legislature was election law, because, I was in the Army 25 years. I've been places where people no longer trust the ballot box and no longer trust civil processes. They do what that guy did to Charlie Kirk a few weeks ago. They shoot each other. They pick up guns, they shoot each other. I swore an oath, to defend our Constitution, defend our way of life, defend our form of government. And that didn't end when I took off the uniform. And so I'm going to fight. I'm going to fight to bring all those people back. Our elections is in our DNA. Picking our own leaders, firing the ones we don't like, and hiring new ones. That's what makes us Americans. And if we lose that, we're just not going to be a country anymore.
What's your solution, or any thoughts on how to increase the number of voters that are currently registered to vote, but for some reason just don't vote? And here in Seward County, if we get 17, 18, maybe 20, 21%, the most in any election we've had lately, how do we go about increasing that number?
I am incredibly concerned about that. So I when I went during the municipal elections in the odd years, I go out and I campaign for candidates that I believe in. They're going to hold the line on budgets and keep our taxes low. And I go door to door, and a number of people that don't even know there's an election just confounds me, And we tried to move them to August and November so that we get more participation, and they're still like 9, 10, 20%. And so, hey, Shannon, how are you?
Oh, I'm just new to the conversation.
Good to see you.
I feel like a regular. Hey, do you drink black coffee?
I do.
This is servant leadership.
God bless you. That's my transportation chair. That's my transportation chair.
Friends in high places. You wanted certain committees. See, you got to make friends, right? Why didn't you go to Senator Masterson and say, hey, can you put in a good word for me? Maybe he could have got you on there.
And in my place with those guys, I'm the friend in the low place.
So low they put him on the highway. I mean, just on the transportation committee, flat out on the road.
So what does it say that you guys are constituents and he didn't bring you coffee?
Yeah,
What's
well, it
that?
says a lot.
Oh, you know.
It tells you a lot.
It shows you how we rate.
No, on the point though, this is an important point, so I'm glad you brought it up. You know, when I'm knocking doors for my election, Leavenworth, to be in the state house, everybody's talking to me about property taxes. And when I'm walking with the voter rolls, I can see they didn't vote in the even or in the odd year election for the school board or the city commission or council, the folks that actually decide their property taxes. So something I'd like to do, and this is, I'm going to get a whole bunch of kickback or pushback from the Kansas NEA, the Kansas Association of School Boards, Kansas League of Municipalities, but I'd like to move all the elections to the even year and make them partisan so that you know something about the people that you're electing. Because right now, you know, a lot of people, they don't want to vote in the odd year elections because they don't know all the candidates, and if there's not an R or a D next to the name, they know zero about them. At least if you put an R or D next to the name, you know something about where they stand on big issues. And so I would love to move all the elections even year. It would make running elections a lot cheaper because you only have to do half as many elections, even if the ballot's bigger. And even if people got tired and didn't go all the way down the ballot, you get more than 10% participation in the off years. This is the local governments are the most important. I'm up here running for Secretary of State, and you're going to talk to some gubernatorial candidates, and they're all great folks, but that school board and that city commissioner or city council has a lot more control over your day-to-day life than any of us are going to have.
Yeah, we learned that recently. We're dealing with some issues here on some taxes, but we've been talking to Pat Proctor. He is candidate for Secretary of State, and if you'd like to meet him and come visit with him some more, you can do that at 5 o'clock tonight at the Pavilion inside Light Park. Weather looks good. It's going to be a nice evening, so come on out and meet Pat Proctor and visit with him. We appreciate you coming in.
No, thank you so much. It was a great conversation.
And we got some more special guests coming, and we're going to visit with them right after this.